And I think we should be live today. I hope everything is working. Hello everyone and welcome to our first Netways webcast for Icinga. And we are hosting Icinga today, and we have DNS Michi here, who should everyone be known by.
Hopefully you know me. If you don't know me, now you know me. And we're gonna talk about a little bit about Icinga 2, the development, and what happened in the past months or in the past year. Why should we start?
So basically what we try to do is to get some brief idea in first place on what the challenges were for Icinga 2.11. So it took quite some time to release it, and maybe some of you in the community are asking, so what's going on? What was the challenge, and why everything might have taken a little longer? And yeah, so that's why we're here today. So you can ask questions, for example, to see, okay, what were the challenges, how we achieved them, and yeah, maybe you want to start. What was your biggest challenge, or at first, what was the goal for Icinga 2.11 in first place, maybe?
I think in the first place, it's always about finding new features for a new release. That's basically the main idea behind a major release. But then you also want to improve things and also fix things which are ongoing all the time. You have a lot of bugs of the same flavor, and you're trying to fix code which is 5 years old, and you're trying to fix it again, and you're breaking things again. And at some point, it's pointless to go on like that. And basically, the main or the biggest challenge which we tried to address with 2.11 was the cluster network stack, which basically is the core component of Icinga, aside from doing checks and notifications and other things. And it goes down below to TCP sockets, TLS, handshakes, performance in this regard, not only for you have 100 hosts, but imagine a situation where you have a distributed environment with many masters, satellites, and 10,000 agents or something like that, where we had lots of issues with deadlocks, long TLS handshakes, and other things. And I think the biggest challenge was
So I think we have no audio, but I don't know why. Let me have a look. So, let me have a look in the chat. Give me a second.
Yeah, take your time. It's our first one.
So I think we have no audio, but I don't know why. 1 second. Let's have a look. Why do we have no sound?
Is it for the Netways stream or for the Icinga stream?
I don't know. I think it's both. I can hear you. Okay. The Netways stream is working. Icinga cannot hear. Is it Icinga? Let's see, which one? Netways can't hear us. Netways can't hear us. Icinga can hear us. That's great. So why can That's
okay,
great.
Okay, we are skipping the development parts for Icinga and debugging audio problems.
Great. So the Icinga stream can hear us. The Icinga stream on YouTube is working. The Netways stream on YouTube is not working. I'm just figuring out why.
Maybe we should just point the users from Netways to Icinga?
Yeah, we can do that. So basically, I'm just trying to do a short fix here.
Yeah, but short fixes always break things.
That's true. So if you can't hear us, you can go to the Icinga stream. Works now. Okay, great.
Okay.
Quick fixes always work. Okay, great. So sorry.
Yeah.
It's the first one, so sorry for that.
technical issues. It's always like you're nervous and then some things break and then the nervosity is gone. So it's a good icebreaker. I think the main challenge was when the communication between the agents and satellites and masters were going on. We had several deadlocks. We had some strange exceptions. It was always like it wasn't really fun like to work with, and also not fun to debug, because normally the developers say it works in my environment, but in the test stages, it works as well. But with a huge setup at customers and community members, it didn't work. And at some point, we had collected too many issues and too many problems, which we were not able to fix in the current code base. And as a developer, it's sometimes really hard to like say, okay, what else can I try? Can I refactor the code? Can I try new things? But actually, the code which controls the cluster stack, or which implements the JSON RPC messages and TLS handshakes, it was deep down in the core and deep down in the code. So it's not easy to like you rewrite one single source code file and it's working again, but you actually need to like pull everything out, start fresh, and try new things. And the main issue we have is Icinga 2 is written in C++. So everyone is saying, use Golang. Yeah, it's a nice idea, but we actually need to use C++. We cannot reinvent the wheel all the time. We actually need to use libraries, or we want to use libraries which are tested by many, because we're, for example, the Boost libraries, which are an abstraction for not doing everything by hand, for TCP sockets, for file system operations, for asynchronous handling and other stuff. It's a good thing to have it, but you also need to implement that in your code base. And in the past, I think it started around about in March or something like that. And we said, okay, we're trying to fix the remaining bugs, but we need to find a long-term solution for stability, especially within the cluster stack. And we sort of defined the name network stack rewrite and many proof of concepts. Alexander did a great job on this. So he created, together with Eric and myself, several proof of concepts, which is basically trying to make things work, but not really production ready. And at some point, we decided to go with Boost and the RCO and coroutines, which is sort of an, how to explain that. Normally, when you're running an application in an asynchronous fashion, you would like to introduce threads. So you have shared resources, you need to wait for some things. And the more threads you spawn, the more context switches the kernel scheduler has to do. And at some point, when you say you have 1,000 threads, it might be blocking, it might be logging, it takes a lot of resources. And with new technologies invented in different languages, also Golang has Go routines in this regard. There's also efforts in the C++ area with coroutines, which basically implement userland threads. So you're not working directly on the kernel level this time, but you're actually creating sort of userland threads, which saves you the overhead of context switching and other stuff, but you need to manage that on your own. Luckily for us, we had the possibility to use higher level interfaces from the Boost libraries, but it's still, it's a technical monster to fully understand and dive deep and also understand what things we need to fix and what other parts we can benefit in the long term from it. So
do you believe it's so for the release itself, for the challenges, for the changes you made, it's one of the biggest changes so far in Icinga? With version 2, or
set aside the initial release, which we did in, I think in June 2014 it was. Okay, that was the biggest one. The REST API stuff, which came in 2.4, was also big. but rewriting everything from the core, from the network stack, I think it's the biggest improvement, also biggest challenge ever been. So some said, well, this could be like Icinga 3 or Icinga 4 or whatever version you may call it. But we decided, yeah, we just need a new release and we need to build on that basis, because we're not stopping here. So it's an ongoing process, and the network stack is one part, but it builds the foundation for like adding new things to the REST API, building new integration with JSON RPC messages, other things which our strategies and our vision is like going on for not only the next 6 months, but let's call it 2 years, 5 years. You need something which you can actually use and support, and you can you also need to create a foundation for also for the developers, because it's not fun to like debug all the time all the same problems, read source code you don't understand, because the people having written that are gone, which is not a not something which we should hide, because it's obviously that Gunnar left the project in last summer. So also a big challenge was the knowledge transfer to actually understand the code, to being able to maintain the code, and also to implement new features, fix bugs. And at some point, many places in the source code were self-written code. No one ever understood it, except maybe Gunnar understood it, but that's really a problem. And having that problem in mind, and my own perfection in this regard, I also don't want to like be the single one-man show doing all the stuff. And yeah, there's a problem. Yeah, Michael is on holiday. Let's call him and he should fix it. No, but currently we're trying to or we're establishing a foundation or a basis to share the knowledge and also to spread the knowledge. Right now it's like 3 or 4 people maintaining Icinga 2 and the core and the backend, which will get an additional burden for, or don't call it burden, let's say an additional software to maintain, which is Icinga DB. You will learn more about this in the coming months, or basically when you're at OSMC, you will see, or you will know what's going on. But still, one needs to find the best resources and maintenance and whatever for Icinga 2. And this is not done by 200 developers or a team of 50 developers, but it's actually 3 to 4 people answering you on GitHub, helping you on the forums, fixing bugs, creating workarounds, third level support for our Icinga partners, and yeah, actually lots of different other things going on. So yeah, knowledge transfer and knowledge about the things going on in Icinga 2 is key for our future.
So basically, in general, when you take a look on the project size in general for Icinga and the development team, you're doing a great job here. But basically, it seems that there are 3 to 4 people doing all the outside stuff in general for Icinga. It sometimes looked like, but you have some more in the back doing a lot of more back work, which are not that present in the web or on forums, for example. So that's yep. Also something that people, I think, don't know, that the team is bigger, but it always looks like it's very few people actually working on it because they're not that present on the web or anything like that.
Yeah, I think one could like say we're around about 15 to 20 people, and in development parts there's also the web development team and the UX team and things, but we're really a small crowd of people. We do have fellow community contributors, but I think the main tasks are really done by like, let's call it 10 people. And we also we have a great community, and we want you to get an answer on the forums or get an answer on Twitter, and also basically on GitHub getting a response which is not like, well, upgrade to the next version maybe, but actually like, can I get a debug log? Can I get some insights? Because you're helping me debugging the problem and others can benefit from it. So it's not like the closed source enterprise approach. Yeah, you get a new release, maybe it fixes your problem, but please try it. But we're actually trying to like be transparent, be open, also with, for example, the analysis for the network stack in general, which was at the beginning, yeah, okay, we need to rewrite it, but people began to ask, yeah, which problems or which things are going to change? Is there any like breaking change to expect? And in the first place, I didn't really know how to like transport that, because at some point it's too technical. Because when I'm going down and trying to explain how a TLS handshake works, it's normally like, yeah, okay, I'm not really interested in that. Can you just fix the bug? On the other hand, it's really an opportunity or a possibility to like share what we know, and also maybe to attract others to join our adventure and actually to join the Icinga project. Work in Nuremberg. Nuremberg is nice because I've been here for around about 7 years now. I left Austria for that. I'm still importing the good stuff like the dragé keksi, but still.
Don't try them out. Once you try them, you're addicted to them and you can't stop. So don't try them if you're trying to look for your weight.
Yeah, but you cannot escape, because when you know me, there's a chance you might get, for example, for good community contributions, or maybe just a laugh on a conference or in a Icinga camp, or maybe next year at the Icinga Conf, there's a chance to get some dragé keksi, which are not available outside of Austria. But I think that's the fun part, aside from all the development stuff and problems and features we're doing with Icinga. It's really an awesome community in regard of like meeting new people, laughing, having like dragé keksi, gin tonic, beer, whatever, and also enjoying life. Because one thing which was really nice to see was like, I think it was in Icinga Camp Berlin 2016 or something, where Carsten had the Globe module and Nikolai was inspired to like create the Maps module, and then Marianne were there for the first time, and there was a little small community, or just let's not call it community. I think friendships actually established within that, and for like community guy like me, or from a developer's perspective, this is way more than one could ever expect from an open source project. And with all that in mind, you can create an SD issue on GitHub, but always keep in mind that there are human people behind it, and we all like have emotions, have feelings, and when sometimes days are rough, tell me about it. I know it because my days are also rough sometimes. And maybe we meet again or in person, and then we just laugh about it. So it's all about a good tone, a good getting together, and just caring about the things we love doing. Yeah, and the bigger things or the bigger bugs, we're taking care about that, and we're also trying to like create new features and add things. But let's be honest. With 10 people, you cannot create that many things. But I think we are creating a lot of great stuff for free, actually. So you don't need to buy an enterprise license for that.
Yeah, so basically, because you said you had lots of issues you had to fix. I have one example for which was very funny for my side, because in first it was the Nessus scan crash for the Windows client. It was one of your greatest challenges, I believe, because in one hand it was Windows at first place that only had the issue, and Michael loves Windows. He's a huge fan, and as you can see, he did lots. There was some support by the community, of course, as well, and lots.
My friends from actually Stevie or Stefan is from Upper Austria, from my hometown Linz. And when I got in touch with them at the Icinga Camp Berlin, it was like, oh, yeah, that's a technical challenge. And I know you, and I've also been to the meetup in Linz lately. And said, I don't know if I can fix it, but it's a challenge. And from a personal background, I used to study at the University for Applied Science is in Hagenberg, which is like in north of Upper Austria. And I actually started developing or learning about development on Windows. So I think I used Visual Studio 6 or something like that, offline with no Stack Overflow or whatever help you can get. And we were programming the Windows 3.2 console, so black screen, and you just hack something and enjoy things. And at some point I lost that and got into network management and Linux and programming and monitoring, and also DNS, hence my nickname from the University of Vienna. And everything was coming back, sort of, because with the Icinga agent on Windows, this is, by the way, a whole new environment and stack you need to understand, because if you're used to like Linux and fork and wait-pit, which is also brain fuck for me, but I'm getting there. On Windows, it's totally different, and I know several things from it, but it's really a challenge. And Windows has a benefit. It has Visual Studio, which is, in my opinion, the best IDE you can
hit
get.
it here first. Michael said Windows has a benefit. You hit it here first.
It has, but it's a challenge to maintain, and also to understand why on Linux or Unix the agent behaves differently to Windows. And for example, the Nessus scan crash ticket. Nessus is a security scanner, so actually you give it certain rules to check for web vulnerabilities, CVEs, and other stuff. And what it does is like it takes all the rules and fires it against every host on the network. I think it's a closed source enterprise product right now. I think 10 years ago or something like that, it was open source. Anyhow, if you need to reproduce a problem, you normally need to have an environment. And the main issue was, Nessus is commercial and I cannot afford a license. And I also cannot get access to an environment where I cannot sign an NDA. So we, for example, for debugging or for fixing problems in special environments, let's call it like that, we need some sort of support contract or support subscription to actually help you. And in this regard, it was not really possible to like get access to the affected machines and debug on them. So I told Stefan and also Philip to like do their homework, do their home exercise. I need a reproducible environment for that. And they actually had a look at the Nessus Essentials trial version, which limits you to 16 IP addresses or something like that. And I got a PDF for dummies, which explained me how to install it, how to like configure it, and how to run it. And we were able to reproduce the problem. And with that help, which was really great, by the way, I did see the crash, but the problem is the crash was random. And at some point when you have the debugger opened, you only see, I cannot access memory at this point for this local variable. And then I like was, okay, that's a race condition, that's timing, that's likely stack or memory corruption related. And at that point, you either shoot your head, you get lots of alcohol, or you're just a perfectionist and want to like learn about new technologies and really understand the problem. And I don't really remember what I did in these 2 weeks, but I was jumping from different solutions I found on the internet. And at some point, I learned that the Windows exceptions on the stack are handled sort of differently by the Visual Studio compiler than GCC or Clang would do it. And I think the fix for the problem is sort of like increasing the stack size, because there are also stack guard patches in place, because Intel fucked something up and now the kernel vendors need to fix it and other things. And it was a fun ride, but it also was painful, because sometimes you cannot really like shut down brain in the evening. You need to like, I cannot try this and 3 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, I have an idea. Okay, taking my iPhone out, taking some notes, and the next morning, I need to go to work and program. And I think it was a little too much, but in the end, I think it was worth it, because I also could like write a full-blown analysis. And also share the information with others, because I do think that many others are like using the Boost libraries, for example, also on Windows, and maybe they are suffering from the same problems. And hopefully others can learn from that and benefit from that. And
so when you, for example, just take a look on the size of this issue, for example, because it's just one example for Icinga 2.11, but you have all this stuff Michael researched and referenced and wrote down with an entire analysis on what's going wrong, what's the issue, and so on. And that's something I think people sometimes might not understand by using software. There might be a lot of work actually behind the scenes to actually track down one simple issue. Because from end user perspective, you simply see, okay, the application is crashing and it's gone. But you don't know why it is crashing, and you expect the developer to actually know everything, I believe, sometimes, and okay, you know exactly what the reason is why the crash occurred. But software, obviously, it's not like that. So I think it sometimes takes also a lot of work and research to actually track down why an issue happened. And I think issues like that are a great example of what can go wrong and what actually is required as work to actually get it done.
Yeah, and I think the road to actually fix a problem like this is you're trying things. So I had a lot of Git commits in my branches where I was trying things. And then I had to like, okay, this direction is not correct. I need to stop here, different branch, try new things. Problem is I need to compile Icinga, so it takes a while. So I have 5 minutes for my own. And then I'm replying on the forums. It's not a good idea when you're busy, but still, I cannot sit there and do nothing. That's not how I love to work. And the main thing was I tried so many things, and there was not one single commit or one single change in this regard. I actually had to, I think it was around about 8 to 10 commits, which were the solution for fixing the Windows agent problem. And the thing is, what I also wanted to share earlier on, it's about knowledge transfer. So I know everything about it. I learned it. I know how to Google it, and I also know how like put 10 different words into Google and hopefully find a result. But I also want to like encourage others, encourage development trainees, starters, everyone like wanting to know about the insights. How do you actually start debugging, or how actually do you start analyzing such a problem? Because if we were just like, okay, Windows is crashing, C++, Boost ASIA, put that on Google, you might find some things, but at first glance it's crashing in UCRT base DLL, which is the universal runtime for Windows. I needed to learn that as well, because it's just there, okay. And then you are actually trying to like attach the Visual Studio debugger to the running process. You're inspecting the memory in the process, which is like I don't know if you learned that in school, but it's really an advanced thing to do all the time. The good thing about Visual Studio again is you have a graphical interface. When we're debugging things on Linux or Unix, it's the terminal, and GDB or LLDB is a great tool, but you actually need to know the shortcuts and breakpoints on the left. So breakpoint means the program is stopping at some point while you are expecting it to stop, and then you're analyzing the state of the variables and trying to see why a segfault is happening. That's always I think it's a long term, or it takes a lot of time if you don't know where the problem actually is. But it's our job. So I'm not saying that I don't like it, but sometimes it's also good to have colleagues watching you in the office and saying, okay, you're not looking good. Let's take a break. Do you need something else? Let's do a different project. And then you're coming back 2 hours or the other day, and you're going on like that. Because after releasing 2.11, it was like, yeah, okay, I need something else. I'm trying to help you with different issues which arose with the release, but actually I was happy to focus on the GitLab workshop I'm doing at OSMC, going to London for GitLab commit, for instance, but actually freeing my brain because it was a huge release, and when you see burnout calling, you should do different things, in my opinion.
So you, for example, said one interesting thing for you want to inspire trainees, for example, to deep dive into technology and to research and so on. Do you believe, as of today, as a developer, you are able to actually get along with something without Google Stack Overflow or anything like that? Would you believe without that you would actually manage to achieve a project like this?
I think it will be really, really hard because with my background coming actually from the Windows development things, I learned a lot about Linux development or Unix development and all the forking stuff which is going on. And in the beginning I was like, I don't understand that code. I have no idea what's going on. And actually I didn't have Stack Overflow when I started with Icinga in 2009, so more than 10 years ago. But at some point you cannot really depend on colleagues and their experience. But honestly, I learned a lot from Gunnar, so really thankful for that, and also the typical insights with you have not only a Fedora or a Red Hat, but you also need to debug on Debian, Ubuntu, SUSE. I don't like SUSE, but it's a different story. But you actually need to understand different architectures, and without the internet, and I'm not talking about Stack Overflow in this regard, but without the capabilities to understand how different compilers and different debugging tools are used on, for example, if you're trying to build it on AX or HPUX or PowerPC, you can do that. But believe me, it's not really fun. That's also mainly the reason why maintaining it, or basically we don't have packages for these architectures, because we don't have the knowledge or the power to actually maintain that. And maintaining not only means create a package on each release, but actually being able to support customer when Icinga crashes on IX, but not on Linux. It's really, from my experience, I know some IX from my past job. It's a different architecture, it's a different environment. You throwing in a developer, which actually basically is an application developer, but you need to understand in CPU instruction sets, different stack handling. I think with OpenBSD, we currently have a problem with signal handling for the new umbrella process we also implemented in Icinga 2 version 2.11. Yeah, it's like you're sitting up front and saying, yeah, okay, it's really, really hard. And I would say being offline and reading some books or trying it as long as you're capable of trying, it's impossible. So I'm really relying on the internet, basically Google. So Google knows everything about me or my development life, and my pain and my sadness sometimes, but also the good things. And with also the help of different communities and in online forums and other things, I always came to the conclusion or to the possibility to actually solve the problems, most of them. There are still some problems, and you can see that on GitHub. We have, I think, 230 issues opened. You cannot fix everything, you cannot implement everything, and sometimes it's also a matter of time and resources. So I know that every problem is the most important one, but we're trying actually our best to take everything into account. And the thing is, when something crashes or there's you don't have an immediate workaround for the problem. A workaround, you can configure something else. If that's not possible, we need to shift resources and make the fix or make the problem analysis in the first place happen. The key part is to always take the time to analyze, to document the problem, because actually when I'm going on holiday and Alex or Noah or Hendrik are taking over, they need to know about it. And I know a lot of things, and that's also the reason why I write everything down. Doesn't matter if it's in Atom, in Markdown. I think I have 20 tabs opened with notes in there, and at some point I'm putting that into issues or into internal tickets, like to share the knowledge and also to allow others to continue where I started. That's my main idea, and at some point I hopefully replace myself, so others can take over, and I'm open for new ideas and new adventures. That's my main idea.
So do you think you learned a lot with 2.11? More, for example, with previous releases, for example, regarding all your research you did for the network stack, for the cluster protocol, for different architectures, or do you think it's something you had to do before in this amount of information?
I think when I was with Gunnar, I always had sort of the possibility to ask someone. I think that sounds hard, but standing alone and trying to how much do I actually know about Icinga 2? And I think I know about 90 or 95%. And I also have a long history of knowing what's going on with Icinga 1 and why we just said, okay, we cannot keep the legacy code base and other stuff. I know a lot of things, how Icinga is used, and not only the core backend, but web modules, integrations. I know how InfluxDB works. I know how Elasticsearch works. So maybe I'm a mix of a marketing salesperson as well. But I think that the best challenge was that Alex actually implemented the network stack proof of concepts and also the current implementation. That's not to be forgotten. And I needed to learn that as well. And I didn't know about Boost ASIO, context, coroutines, and other stuff, and was like, yeah, I want to learn about that. And the internet is in this regard not so good, but there are some good books on it. And I took the liberty to just buy some ebooks from, I think, PactPub or something like that. And I read them on the weekend. And I tried to learn and understand how this is working. What's the basic concept behind it? Because it's not just code and functions you call, but you actually need to build something with it. So having the design patterns and the different possibilities in mind, it was really, really a challenge. On the other hand, with Hendrik on the team, being new, being fresh, not knowing everything. That's also a nice challenge to actually not throwing everything at someone, but to like, I think we did some things with the backend. We started with debugging cluster problems lately. So with the 2.1 and 2.11.1 was last week. .2 is coming tomorrow. We are fixing some bugs which we introduced in the new release, unfortunately. But that's the small things. You can really share the knowledge. You can try to write things down. And my main intent is like to document everything. And also, for example, I think that started out with the TA proxy, which is sort of a certificate signing forwarder in this regard, which we implemented for VW in 2.8. There was also the customer requirement to document the technical concepts behind it. And we said, okay, that's a good idea. We always wanted to do that, and we also wanted to like share more how Icinga 2 is actually designed and implemented. And that's really an ongoing process to take the time and also take the lead and say, I want to do this. Then Eric says, or Blair says, yeah, but we need this feature right now. Okay, yeah, then we can make this work somehow. And sometimes it's also a long document in my atom somewhere, but I'm writing everything in Markdown. Doesn't matter where I'm writing it, but it's Markdown, so I can copy paste it into GitHub, into the documentation, even into the discourse form, which uses Markdown to format things. And the technical concepts documentation has grown a lot in the past month, which I'm really proud of, because I don't know if it helps people, but it shares what we actually are trying to achieve, what we are doing, how things work in the backend. And from a security perspective, it's also good that others know how, for example, the TLS handshakes work, how this is implemented. And with 2.11, for example, we also hardened the security in some ways. Requiring TLS 1.2 and also the default cipher lists, because we all know that the monitoring data is basically the heart of your network, or the heart of your infrastructure. There are passwords all around it, credentials, you are fetching runtime data. You could actually play some big data in the middle and expose that data or abuse it in some way. And if you're using some sort of lame security, like NRP is using, it's a possible attack vector. And with an advanced security layer, and in addition the zone and endpoint configuration, which sometimes is like, yeah, I'd rather shoot my head instead of installing it. But on the other hand, the trust hierarchy with the zones and endpoints is key to a secure monitoring environment. So we are putting security into focus all the time, which is, I think, something other competitors on the market are sometimes not capable of, and I think it's a good direction, taking the lead for better security in monitoring.
So do you believe in general that, for example, let's say open source project, small independent projects have a different approach, especially when it comes to security, for example? Because, for example, you have plenty of issues with, let's say, security vulnerabilities which are present for a very long time in some places. And do you think open source software in general, not especially Icinga, but open source software in general, is handling it differently because there are more people actually having a look on it and actually are able to work on possible solutions here?
I'd say open source definitely helps in this regard and makes it better, because normally when it's also like, let's take for example curl, which is used nearly everywhere, and there's the maintainers can actually react to security problems in a fast time. They can release bug fixes. Upstream vendors can take it into account. Maybe the upstream vendors, like the Red Hat guys, the Red Hat folks, actually found that problem, so they can actually work together. And I think that's a great opportunity, because when you're looking at some vendor lock-in, closed source, whatever software, you sometimes might not know about the security issue, and they also do not create a CV because it's not really necessary. And at some point, you might find a leak on your network, or the monitoring data is exposed, for example. Then it's not a good thing. And I think we can see that also, for example, with Elastic Stack in the past years, because in the first place you have, or let's call it like the awareness for security, because in the first place, yeah, Elasticsearch has an HTTP API, but there's no TLS in front. Okay, the first thing you're building is an HTTP proxy which puts in TLS endpoint, or nowadays you can use the XPack extensions and secure the communication, but that took a while to actually make people aware of that problem. I think with InfluxDB it's not a problem to use HTTPS for communication and other things. Problem is with security and TLS, you need certificates, and you need to actually understand how this works. And what's with problems with no shared ciphers available, or version problems? What's actually the idea behind the signing authority and CA? What's that? I didn't know all that before starting with Icinga 2. And I also learned a lot, like using the OpenSSL as client, CLE commands. And everything I know is basically written into the troubleshooting docs for Icinga 2, because it helped me, and it also should help others, because every time I'm explaining something 5 or 10 times on the community channels, I said, okay, let's just write it down, then I can link it, and hopefully others will find it, because Google puts it somewhere, and hopefully you can just solve the problem on your own, and maybe even share it with others. And I think that's a good thing to even if long troubleshooting docs might say the product is not good enough, on the other hand, you get a lot of tooling and a lot of things you might not have known about, and also I didn't know about it. I just wrote it down. I had systart or vmstart or other things. Yeah, I've been using that for 10 years now, and I know everything, and I also know how to log, grab, debug, whatever. But if you don't know that, you need to learn it, and you can practice that from debug sessions. But you also need a document to where can I look at it, because Googling takes time, and if you Google it a lot, I think I have one page in Google which I'm visiting regularly. I think that's how to replace white spaces in VI or something like that, and other things. But yeah, you need to practice it and also know what to look at. So documentation is far from perfect, as always, but I think a little effort for the documentation is always good enough.
Yeah, so for documentation, because I know you spend a lot of time documenting it, and for example, we have on icinga.com/docs or docs.icinga.com, every module, every component actually has some documentation, and it's basically a first explanation on what Icinga actually is, so you can get started and how everything works in first place. And then, yeah, you have installation, the basics for configuration and whatever. And it gets very, very deep also in the API, for example, when we have a look on how you actually use the API on Icinga 2. Because I'm not if you don't know how to use a certain system, how to use a certain API, you always have issues actually implementing it, or why should I use it, for example. So my best use case, for example, are Windows administrators who are actually using the API, regardless if it's Icinga 2 or a web, to set downtimes for their host objects when they apply Windows updates. Because the Windows guy doesn't care about the monitoring, so he wants to install updates, he simply installs them. But when you restart Windows, the monitoring will get an alert, and especially when you're running SLA reporting afterwards, you will have an SLA impact here. So that's something, a great use case you can do with such APIs. But you need to get aware of, okay, what can I do actually with it, and how can I resolve it?
If you scroll down and on the menu on the right, you can actually see for 2.11, I've migrated the API examples Git repository. Scroll down to the bottom. There's somewhere there's an example in PowerShell. Yeah, that's the last one.
Here.
So I'm not really a PowerShell programmer myself, but there was Michael Intel from our community and also core contributor, and he created a script, and I said, okay, let's just modify it and actually provide an example how to use the REST API inside the documentation. So the code is far from perfect, but it gives you an actual working example. And there are other languages like Ruby, PHP, Perl, Python. I think there's also one for Golang somewhere. So that should get you started. And I think with the documentation for the REST API, because at first glance, or let's just call it like for Icinga 1, we had a dedicated docs team because we already had the documentation. It was forked from Argus, modified a little, enhanced. On the other side, it was like, we are creating a new product for Icinga 2 for the new core backend, and the developers need to write the documentation. And when you are implementing a whole new feature set, and you also need to write documentation, it's okay. So you need to actually find the love for documentation. And my English was not that good at that time, but I learned a lot, and I also took business English courses provided by Netways. So I'm also learning and improving my English, also with helping community members. And it doesn't matter how good or bad your English is, just try it. And don't say, I want to talk in German or French or whatever. My French is really rusty, so I can read it, but I cannot really write it. But the main idea is like, we need to write good documentation. But when you imagine new features like the apply rules and loops and conditions, everything possible with the Icinga DSL, we have that documented each on its own, so you know how about regex or string type operations and other things. Then, for example, the object accessors, everything is documented, but putting that together, putting the glue between all the possibilities, and also like using the REST API, that's really hard to imagine from the beginning. And that was certainly the point where I started relying on the community forums and also like writing better answers than you might get, or because normally I'm trying to keep things short, but sometimes for example, the DSL ideas, the possibilities are endless. You can actually write functions and lambda things and whatever in there, so it can get really complex. But I really do love these challenges, and I'm normally taking them. The main idea is to enhance the documentation, and for the REST API for 2.4, which is I think 4 years from now or 3 years from now, we had the desire to like create good documentation, and we looked at the Foreman documentation. I think DigitalOcean also had a REST API, and we actually tried to figure out how the URL endpoints work, how to like tell someone who doesn't know what a REST API actually is, keep things simple, but also document everything which is possible. And I think the REST API documentation still is the best part, or the best documentation we've ever written. Everything else tries to enhance it. I think I have written the distributed monitoring documentation 2 times now. I'm still not satisfied with it because it's a really complex setup, but we are getting better. But writing documentation is also like being in the mood for writing documentation, because when someone says write documentation for feature X, it's like okay. And if you want to write something which is which you can like find on Google and get to know about the details, but also use it as a certain how-to or as an article which guides you, that's really hard to combine. And at some point, the documentation is just, here's an example, you can do it like this, but if you need an how-to, please go to the community channels and ask your question, because then the documentation is barely readable.
So I think it's also quite difficult to actually write a documentation for everyone, for example, because when you're writing documentation, you have a feature set in your mind. You know, okay, how should I write it in some places? But just because you understand it later on doesn't mean everyone else understand it. So, for example, Yoshi just said he learned German to actually could read the early Icinga 2 documentation because it was only German.
Was it? Okay.
I think it was in German quite some time. I think so.
Yes,
But I can't. But it's very, very long time ago.
I think so. The problem is time is running fast, and I remember that the key releases from 2.0 to like, I think in 2.2 we added functions or if conditions.
So he said the early documentation were better in German than English, he thinks. That's why he looked up the German ones.
Okay. Yeah, maybe he's confusing that with Icinga 1, maybe, but I don't know. I think the main problem is also in regard of like having a German documentation. Yeah, we all know how to like use our native language, but when someone is contributing a new feature or bug fix or wants to fix the documentation, he needs to understand the language. And I'm not saying that my English is perfect, but I'm trying my best, and you sort of need to create a foundation for a language which is used everywhere. And sometimes I get asked, why is the Icinga 2 documentation not in German, for example? So yeah, I could write it definitely, but someone needs to like sync it between the English version and the German version. And if someone contributes to the English version and doesn't speak German, you always need a resource to like keep this up to date. And we learned that with Icinga 1, where the German documentation was far off because no one really cared about it. I said, no, we won't take the effort. Also not with like, again, 10 people working on everything. You cannot, it's really hard to like keep it up like that. And also with community support, you want to include everyone. And it doesn't matter if your English is bad or if Google Translate helps you in this regard, no one will make a joke about it, because we are all human beings. We know how hard it is to actually learn a different language. But don't care about errors. Try your best and ask your question, and someone else hopefully is coming and help you in English. And if you're still using Google Translate, it's not an issue. We shouldn't really create language barriers in our community.
So Thomas made one good point regarding the Icinga book, and it was referred to taking your consideration on how you write documentation, for example. Because when you write a book, for example, the book is there forever. You can't simply say, okay, now I'm changing something because it's bad or it's not working out properly for everyone. But when you have a book, you have to be sure that everything is explained. Like you read it in 5 years, and you still get to the point what the author was actually looking for, or was trying to say here in first place.
Yeah, I think some parts in the documentation haven't been touched for years now because they are just there. Other parts are like changed. For example, for 2.11, there was a long discussion going on. Is it now called custom attributes? Is it called custom variables? And there's also a problem. It's not only Icinga 2. It's Icinga Web. It's the director. It's modules. You need to align the terminology at some point. And I'm not really happy with the change in the documentation for Icinga 2.11 with naming everything a custom variable. But in the end, it was the least impact regarding other products, like to change every description, change the source code, and other things. So there are some changes, but they are all documented in the upgrading documentation. Maybe you can just open it. So at first glance, upgrading Icinga 2 was only...
Do you know where it is?
Yeah, it's below troubleshooting. Just move your mouse a little lower.
Ah, here.
At first glance, it was only update the IDO database scheme and nothing else breaks. But I think with the bottom-up client configuration deprecated in 2.6 and removed later on, we actually needed to ensure that everything is documented, because you learn a hard lesson if you don't tell people, and normally people don't read the changelog, they just run yum update. You actually need to have a point where you can link to. And if you're spreading it out between GitHub issues, changelogs, and Twitter and forums and whatever, it's best to have it in a single place. And it also helps our support for partners and customers to just have a single location what exactly changed and what is the action you need to take from it. So if you're like going over the 2.11 upgrading docs, it's also more of an informational level, except for the changed package dependencies, because we needed newer boost versions. And you need the EPL repository on Red Hat 11, Red Hat 7. And for example, on Debian Stretch, you need backports. You need that. Please don't create GitHub issues. We already have 15 of them. But that's the thing. It's funny, but it's also like not again, because everything is written down in the upgrading documentation for now. Sometimes we are also like forgetting things because you fix something like the command endpoint needing to be in a zone. For us, it was like, yeah, okay, that's a bug, because otherwise the scheduler or the HA capabilities of Icinga 2 do not kick in. Yeah, let's just fix it and make this a config error. And in our tests, it works fine and nobody uses that. Yeah, at release time, because during the release candidate period for 8 weeks, no one caught that. Yeah, that's broken. Okay. Yeah, why is it not written down in the upgrading docs? So yeah, we didn't think it was really a breaking change, but then we learned it's sort of a breaking change, but we need to keep it because we need to ensure that host agents are actually checked in this regard. But the best thing you can do is document it, write it into the upgrading documentation, tell about it, or link to the troubleshooting documentation, and ensure that that everyone can actually like or have something in the first place without having to create a GitHub issue or asking the community or just saying, yeah, fuck this shit, I'm installing whatever, but actually get help. And that's not something we get paid for by no one. But I think it's keeping up the quality level and ensuring that Icinga works as a monitoring tool in your tool stack. It's far beyond a single tool which does checks or whatever, like in the old times. But it's gotten that complex that also writing these upgrade docs for a release is also like reflecting what changed or what things we need to take care about. I think that's the main idea, and I do love writing that, and hopefully my colleagues do that as well, because for Icinga Web 2 we also have sometimes breaking changes, and they're also documented. And I think we're just getting better, and also getting not always the negative feedback, because the most thing, I hate about release feedback is you have push 2.11 and the only thing you get, zone in zone doesn't work, command endpoint with zones doesn't work, fix this shit now. I don't care if you're burned out from the release, but fix it now. And it's like, which is not the best feedback. But I also try to like explain to others that I'm just a human being and I won't fix the mess. But can you just be gentle? Please ask how long it will take to fix, or maybe we can find a solution. And I also do understand that it broke your system at 3 a.m. in the morning and you got paged about it. But I cannot do much about it, and calling my work a mess is not the best idea. Like to get help. That's I think that was the most stressful part after releasing the 2.11. But
I think it's also that one stays actually in your mind more than everything. Hey, great job. I think because it somehow reflects a little more, and that's I think something that's something. What you said earlier is that there are human beings behind writing the software. So, for example, if something breaks, it's not that great, especially when you have a long RC phase, for example. But taking a look, for example, at other big companies who have hundreds of people in QA, for example, and they release something like Google or Apple or Microsoft, and they all have to push out patches and bug fixes because something breaks. So I think the best example for this is the Microsoft update last year, the Oktober update, which suddenly deleted all files once you updated to the new Windows 10 version. And that's something you see, well, such a great company that shouldn't happen, but it still happens. So because you can't actually cover every single use case, I believe. Because everyone would have to upgrade in their environment to the latest Icinga version, for example, to see, does it actually break something? And no one would do that, because that's fine, because you have a production environment, and even your testing environment might not cover it. I think that's the biggest problem you have here in first place.
I think it's not only related to monitoring tools, because let's call it the DevOps stack or whatever you keep calling it. But modern applications, the development is fast. It's faster than an upstream Debian repository can like package that. So everyone has a package repository right now. And then you need to like keep up with the changes, because if you're like trying to upgrade your Kubernetes cluster, the only thing I heard lately is, you just recreate it separately and then shut the one down and start with the other one, because there's no clear upgrade path. And maintenance with the tool stack is also a problem. And when I was in London for GitLab commit, for example, there was also the toolchain crisis highlighted on a slide, where everything like you need 10 different tools to create your container platform, your CI platform. There's Jenkins on the left, and there's a Git repository, then there's issue management, then there's some different tracking. That's all fine. But the main problem is you have a wide variety of tools to choose from, and you need to like choose the ones you actually want to use, and then still it's more than just a single service which needs a restart. So the maintenance is becoming, it's getting on a deeper level. So you need to also become an expert in the tooling you're using, which is not like I know that from some companies also in Austria. Yeah, monitoring. Yeah, we are doing that on the side. So we cannot afford a consultant or some support contract for monitoring because monitoring must just work, and
it's not important.
It's not important. I also used to do projects where monitoring was implemented at the end. So the whole cloud and virtual machines were created up front, and I got a list of IP addresses. And yeah, can you please monitor that? So the shift to making monitoring a key part of the rollout, like automatically provision from Puppet, Ansible, use director imports, not really monitoring the containers, but for example the services, creating business processes, also incorporating metrics. That's I think that's complicated, and it will take more human resources to actually cover all the things. And also monitoring is evolving from like not only monitoring, but people demand like managing things, automated updates on the left, automated rollouts, inventory, scanning, whatever things. It's big. I think it's a challenge to keep up there, and
monitoring is getting way more complex than it used to be, because you have not said today you're not having this single environment or the static environment that's staying for the next 5 years, because today in most environments it's changing on a daily basis. You have new virtual machines, new Docker containers, for example, running up, and you need to actually take care of that and track it and make it trackable.
Yeah, and the interesting part is like, for example, if you put a classic service-based monitoring or state-based monitoring, like Icinga, in contrast and comparison with a metric collector like the tick stack from InfluxDB or Prometheus, you cannot really compare it because they solve a different purpose. You can try to like figure out how to integrate it and how to like open up the interfaces. That's also what I said. I need a stable network stack to actually add new things to the REST API, like to maybe create a Prometheus export for that and also actually integrate that. And on the other hand, monitoring also is like, I've seen, for example, you could also like call it you're monitoring your development workflow lifecycle. So if you're going like the GitHub Actions CI/CD thing, or better take GitLab CI/CD, you have sort of your developers actually creating code, merge requests, and other stuff. The CI/CD system takes care of testing the code, actually deploying this. And this is also sort of a type of a monitoring, but it's not the classical service monitoring, but it's sort of an like workflow end-to-end, making the product great monitoring in this regard. Or open tracing is a different example. So the monitoring is changing. So the term is changing. Many people tend to think differently about the term, but I think it's hard to keep up, but it's worth the challenge to keep up and to not to like. I like Icinga, but if someone says, well, I like to use, for instance, Prometheus because I only need metrics, and I don't need business processes and modules and other stuff, I say, okay, yeah, that's fine for me, but maybe we can find a way to like combine it or make it work together.
So Mickey, for example, says, thanks for Icinga, good to see a cool stream with some of the devs. So, and he also said that he liked the refining of the docs for the deployment, because Docker was hell of a challenge to run Icinga into some years ago. So he appreciates that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's.
And yes, just to answer the question, the stream is recorded and will be online afterwards. So if you are late in joining, you can still watch, of course, but you can start from scratch afterwards.
Yeah, Rico needs to do some dead ops, he told me on Twitter, so he cannot attend. So when he sees that, hello. About the Docker thing, I wasn't really aware of that because in the I think it was started out 5 years ago. I tried to understand Docker. I actually also read an ebook on the weekend or on the flight to Portland or something like that. I never really understood how it worked, and right now I know it, but maybe it's a little too late. The thing is also with maintenance and creating the right Docker image for everything. I think maybe we are getting there at some point, but also there's from Bodo Schultz, the Docker images for Icinga work pretty well, what I've heard. And I think from Sidetracks and also Jordan Chetwer from Adobe, those containers serve a good job. And I also think that like with the environment variables exposed in a Docker container, everyone builds that in a different fashion, and also like Docker Compose with Graphite, Apache or Nginx for Icinga Web 2. I think that that's built in a different way, but the main thing I didn't understand was with the init1 and running Icinga 2 in foreground, that it didn't work. And the funny thing about this was Alex was trying to implement fixes in this regard. And then we had to work around a problem with systemd killing plugin checks or plugin processes on reload. This was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before the planned release candidate. And I said, okay, we need to fix this. And the only fix, we tried everything with kill mode in systemd service files and other things. So Alex, Eric, and me were sitting in the meeting room and hacking 2 hours time. And I said, no, we cannot fix this. Yeah, let's create an umbrella process. Yeah, we actually wanted to do that 5 years ago, like everyone else does it, but we didn't have the time. And Alex was like, yeah, I'm doing it. And the next day, yeah, can you review my pull request? And it was like, okay, yeah. And now I need to understand it, so please show it to me. And with fixing one problem, we actually added the possibility to run Icinga 2 natively in Docker, which is a great thing. But I never would like expected it to happen just because we need to. Yeah, I'm just checking.
So we have some more thank you for your work and the background information in the video. Yeah, you're welcome. That's actually basically the idea, because I think it's quite hard. Honestly, it's some sort of, you do lots of webinars, you do lots of blog posts and Twitter and so on and community forums. But for example, actually having to discuss something, to talk about it, is actually a great benefit for everyone, because you can actually get, okay, what was the problem? You can learn something from it, but you also get a deeper insight into Icinga itself, for example. And I think that's a great opportunity.
I think that the most important part is to understand that Icinga is not me. It's definitely not me. So don't take everything for granted, which you heard in the past hour. But it's a great team of people. Encourage people working their ass off, for example, to actually finish up the new backend implementation. So while we are talking right now, my colleagues are sitting in the dev room number 14 right now and creating the backend daemon, finishing up the front end daemon, and set aside. They're working also on the reporting module. And I don't know what else should be finished up for OSMC in 2 weeks. But still, it's the many of us, and not many of us are like visible all the time. So some of us are actually visiting many Icinga camps, or OSMC Icinga Conf next year is a good possibility for you to meet us all, hopefully. So it's our first attempt to go into, or to like create a bigger conference, a bigger audience, and try things out. actually in Amsterdam, which should be reachable from all over the world because it has a great way to arrive it, because Nuremberg might not attract everyone. Yeah, and the thing is, it's the people behind Icinga and the people with Icinga, because we have many friends, customers, users all around the globe. We're all coming from different cultures, from different background, and the journey is just amazing. And it's, I think when I have a hard time, or just like, yeah, not again this bug, I'm always like standing back, or just stepping a little back and think about the people who just drive us. And I think that's heartwarming. And I personally would never have like expected this when I started with Icinga. Just like open source, woohoo! And
it's a magic voodoo open source project.
yeah, it's
but it's quite interesting that the in general, when you take a look, for example, when Icinga started and where it is now with Icinga 2, with all the Icinga camps, with the Icinga Conf and so on, it's growing and growing, and that's very interesting, because
it's
some years ago you said, well, okay, you have Nagios, and what you have Icinga, what's that? Okay, it's another fork, and now you have Icinga 2, which is taking it to the next level.
And I think I struggle a lot with Icinga 1 and trying to implement things and break live status and mod Gima and whatever. The funny part was
Mickey, for example, can't wait for the next East Coast camp because he can't go overseas, for example. So
East Coast, yeah.
Yeah. So
let's see how next year turns out. I think we are pushing lots of resources into Icinga Conf, but never say never. Maybe I'm also coming overseas in next year or 2 years. I just try to like step a little back and focus on development and other things, and not attending every meetup or event, Icinga camp. But still, jetzt ist mal runtergefallen. I forgot what I wanted to say. Do you remember? No. We need to like rewind and and see what I was talking about.
So maybe someone can help.
Yeah, I know it again. I was talking about how I came into Icinga 2 and all the things. There's a funny story behind it, because the first people, or the initial people behind Icinga were Bernd, Marius, myself, Julian, and also the other Michael. And I was sitting in Vienna, and Netways was sitting in Nuremberg. And it was like, okay, yeah, we should meet and we should do a hack session. And I think in March we met in Vienna, and in October we met in Nuremberg for like 2 or 3 days. And at some point in early 2012, Gunnar was with Marius and Bernd, and they had to show me something which was called codename Strawberry, which is basically Icinga 2 in its early stages. And there was like, yeah, it's C++ and shared pointers, and it was like, shared pointers? I know C++, no idea what this is. And Gunnar had to like explain it 3 times to me. And this is what actually attracted me that much, because leaving away the legacy code base from Nagios, and actually creating something new, and also doing the architecture work and the concept and everything you don't really know about, but you're actually trying to make it right, because you know how it's done wrong, and things in Nagios are basically, except for the plugins, are done wrong, from a modern perspective, of course. And this really attracted me, so that I moved to Nuremberg from Vienna in summer 2012, or late 2012 actually, because plans started out in August. But yeah, finding a flat and something else in Germany is pretty easy with the European Union. Still a challenge, but it's really easy. So I don't get it how people want Brexit, but that's a different story. And believing in this, and we also had fights and discussions, and we cannot do it like this, and also changing the different technical previews we had for Icinga 2 back in the days. So there was 0.01 till 10, I think, or 11 before reaching the final 2.0 release. That was really a challenge, but it's really fun to like create something new where you going into the sort of unexpected route. So you know that you built something good, but then someone comes and says, yeah, it's a good feature, but if you add like the sugar on the cake like this, so interesting. And it's all it's a give and get. So if you, for example, have an idea and you said, yeah, that's fucking that's too deep, or that's possibly not going to implement it ever. Yeah, but you should like tell us. And if you don't want to like put it on GitHub, for example, maybe just like go to an event, join us. Normally at Icinga Camp Berlin, there are some Icinga team members around, and when I'm going to lunch, we always have good conversations and chats, and sometimes like chatting with others, not only Icinga developers, is like, yeah, I have this idea, how did you solve it? Yeah, I'm also cooking with water and not everything else. And then a cool new idea arises. Maybe someone has a boss who likes to sponsor some development time. That's also a good thing. So thanks everyone who took the time to convince their managers like to pay some days for development time, which otherwise we couldn't like do that. And well, Netways I think is sponsoring a lot in this regard, which I think never will pay off. But I'm not here to get rich, or like someone said on Twitter recently, I'm already rich because I found new friends. Yeah, and that's the thing. Just keep in touch and share your ideas, but also share the love for Icinga. And yeah.
Speaking of getting in touch, Icinga Conf 2020. The best way actually to get in touch, Icinga Camp, Icinga Conf.
Yeah, and some Netways commercial is also allowed. OSMC is also a good thing. I don't know if there's still tickets for OSMC left, but I will be there, and I'm just there talking to you. And there's also a hackathon, which is also great for like having a day paid by, hopefully it was, and actually trying to solve things, implement new things, get in touch. But I think at the Icinga Conf it will be just awesome, and even a better opportunity to share the latest and the greatest, talk about our vision, our strategy, our roadmaps, everything which maybe not so visible or transparent at this time, but we are working we are already working on things coming for Icinga Conf. That's for sure, and that's promised.
Okay, so Mickey says learning of director API in distributed environments has much to go, but upward and onward for learning all these things. And I think, yeah, the funny part is that when you, for example, take a look on Icinga itself, on the Icinga DSL or Icinga Director, there are endless possibilities in general you actually don't get in first place. Because when you start this, you're overthrown with, I have lots of things I can actually do. Where do I start? And from my point, I think that, or the funny part is, the more you do with it, the better your ideas get of what you can actually achieve in first place. And just do other World Confs require other languages, German over English? I was curious about it. No, so basically we try every conference, every camp to be either in. So the OSMC, for example, is around 50% German, 50% English, and the Icinga camps are, I think, all English,
Yeah, it's
and the conference as well.
Everything in the official Icinga context is English, which is basically, like I said, we want to include everyone. And for OSMC's and Netways conference, which was, I think, totally German 10 years ago, and we are shifting it to like 70-80% English. That can be a challenge, that's for sure, but I wouldn't say that's a bad thing, because if you're pushing it harder and harder and harder, it will be a 100% English conference at some point. Hi, Bernd. Yeah, I love to talk in German, but I'm not talking German. I'm talking Austrian dialect. But I know that 9 of 10 users won't understand me, and that includes German people. But that's the thing. For the different APIs and Direct, I wanted to tell you something. We are aware of the feature monster, the featureities we created, and we are pushing resources on it to make the first steps easier, which covers documentation, covers the setup, tooling which we provide, but it's an ongoing thing or ongoing project, which we cannot solve now or cannot solve in 2 weeks' time. But we are aware of that, and it's also it's not we need to combine the product a bit better, or provide certain interfaces in one, and not having 3 APIs and 5 different ways to configure Icinga, but we actually want to propose one way. Right now, I can only promise you to help you in every way we can on the forums, on the community channels, with getting a support subscription, getting professional help, whatever you need. We can make things happen. The main thing is we cannot solve it right now, but we are definitely aware of that, and that's a short-term or mid-term plan to get things going in this regard, because at some point monitoring should be as simple as possible, and if you really want to go the advanced route, you should have the possibilities, you should have it documented, and you also should get help for it. But the first success in seeing your Windows agent in your monitoring with disk partitions, event log, whatever, that should also be possible in 1 hour time, 2 hours time, and not taking 1 week, for example.
Yeah, so I think we have time for one last short wrap-up, because we have 1.5 hours already. Oh. So but it's great. You had a lot of fun talking, obviously. So yeah, good chocolate in Austria. That's true. Sadly, that I have good chocolate, but the thing is, Linz is 3.5 hours drive away from Nuremberg, so one can import lots of good things, so keksi and coffee. That's true, sadly, but you never can't stop with those dragée cakes. Once you started, and that's horrible.
But we also have we have Thomas on the Icinga team, who's actually living in Austria, so on a daily basis or weekly basis, he may import the good stuff.
Yeah, it's always it's horrible. So thank you at any rate. You're welcome. So if you missed something, you can watch the stream later again to when you joined late, to get the first 1 hour of our of our talk. So understanding sounds, master and satellite client is where I still have much room to grow. Yeah, but some sort of experience. The more you use it, it's the same for Puppet, Ansible, Chef, or any other tool. The more you use it, the more you're knowledge grows in that place actually, and that makes it actually using it better.
And don't hesitate to ask. So no one is biting you because you don't understand how a distributed system is built. And the best thing is like show what you've tried already, show the configuration, show basically the failure you've seen. And others may assist you and may like say on the forums, yeah, you've missed, for example, the parent attribute for the zone relationship, and that's why your config sync is not working. And it's sometimes, yeah, you're working 3 days. It's frustrating, and you don't get it. But at some point, someone says, "Yeah, I see it. You just need to fix one line, and then it's working." It's a steep learning curve, and this is what actually also drives me when working with the director, for instance, because I'm coming from the static Icinga DSL. And okay, we have created a configuration tool based on top. It's using the REST API and the config packages, which we actually built the REST API in the first place for, because we needed a transparent layer to deploy changes from a remote host. And then we built everything on top for the REST API, which replaces NSCA, external check results, actions, and many other things, runtime object creation, and so on. And when I started with the director, I said, why do I need a template? I said, okay, I don't really like that attempt, but then I started trying things out and learning about service sets, even learning about input sources and other things. It's really a rough time. I know that the documentation always can be improved. On the other hand, when you got a web interface and you got tooltips and telling you things, you have the capabilities of create a screenshot, ask someone, get in touch with the community, and actually learn about it. And for example, I learned a lot from the Icinga 2 book. Because I read about service set and said, interesting. The documentation couldn't tell me that, no problem, but I got to use a different source. And that emotion when you actually fix the problem and the host or service check is popping up in Icinga web, it's oh, that's awesome. This in the first place was it doesn't really work. I don't like that. And then you have that success, and it's, oh yeah, I need to keep going, and maybe I can share my knowledge with others and sticking to the forums or the community channels. And I've also seen others oh, I've took the challenge, and now I'm sort of an expert, and I can actually help others. It's a good feeling because helping others is always they learn from you. You get a thank you, which is good. Getting good feedback is really important, because normally also as a developer, you will normally get the call to, oh, things don't work, fix this. And just getting to know the things and becoming a monitoring expert and sharing your expertise. And maybe someone sends you a package of Trashikexi or something else. Who knows? But the thank you is important, in my opinion.
Okay. I think we can close it with that one.
I can talk all day long. So.
I know exactly, but I think we wouldn't have the chance to stop then. So do you believe we are well prepared with the next iterations of Icinga, especially Icinga 2.12, which might be coming soon?
Yeah, just one thing about 2.12. I've talked with Eric yesterday, and we're going to go the release candidate route again. So prepare for a release candidate, which includes the Icinga DB backend feature. I think round about OSMC, because we learned a lot from the release candidate phases. Not to create a new release, push it out, and then fix 10 bugs and release 10 bug fix releases, but to actually allow everyone to test it, to reiterate and say, okay, we need to actually fix something afterwards, like we had with the cipher lists and TLS handshake handling and different other things we needed to fix. So it will be coming, or you will get a 2.12 release candidate, and we also will continue that with our other products. So for web, for Icinga DB, and so on, all major future releases will get a release candidate first. But
Great.
yeah, we are well prepared, and I hope to talk to you soon again.
Yeah, great. So yeah, thank you for the positive feedback for the Q&A stream. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, we can do it more often, regularly for each release, for example, for each major release, let's say. Maybe a dedicated Q&A stream where you can submit questions beforehand. Yeah, that's something we could definitely do. So we could, for example, do a Twitter hashtag. So you can submit questions. We can then get into it, for example, to actually get into it. That wouldn't be a problem.
I don't know if how.
But you can also do it live.
But I think the best opportunity is to like do it live. The problem was we wanted to announce this earlier, but we are quite busy right now with OSMC preparations and other things. So we actually forgot about it. And the announcement yesterday evening was like, I was sitting on the couch and saying, hey, Christian, did we announce it? No. Yeah,
no, we didn't.
No, we didn't. Let's just look up the YouTube URL and just do it. And so this was more like a spontaneous event right now. But still with the possibilities for YouTube comments and so on. I think it's a good idea to be spontaneous and not have like an agenda, but having a letter from the community with questions is certainly a good idea. And I think we will be coming back soon.
Yeah, but I think in total, I think it's very funny. We had, I think, 2 minutes audio issues at the very beginning, but everything is playing very well out. So we had no big issues. I'm very interested.
So let's check.
Excited about that.
Let's check the recording, because if it didn't work out,
yeah, we will see later.
Yeah, the others won't see it, but.
Thomas made an interesting point. Asking questions live is great, but you can always kick experts off balance with surprises. But I think that's the actual challenge then at one hand. When you have a question you can't really answer, or you have to struggle a little bit.
So I can show you what I wrote down. So that's basically my list I wanted to talk about. It's not everything we covered, but I tried to like get a protocol for myself what I maybe wanted to talk about, but I really do like the challenge of getting things asked which I'm not like where I cannot prepare for it. That's basically the fun of it. But don't hesitate. You can also I think we will find a platform how to do it, but if you got something which bugs you, just put it on community icinga.com, ask us on Twitter or something else or somewhere else. We're not hiding, we're not robots, we're human beings, as you can
That's
see.
true.
Answers may last some time, but we're doing our best to be there for you and to also have fun with you.
But actually it seems I'm hiding, because the microphone is always it's always blending me out a little bit. But well, so yeah, I think that's it. If you have feedback for us, if you have additional questions or whatever, you can ask us on Twitter, write us an email, info@icinga.com, info@netways.de. Doesn't actually matter. Why you're looking so like that?
No, I've been. The problem is the setup here. This is what the viewer cannot see, and it's really new for me because Christian is doing lots of live streaming and gaming and Twitch and whatever in his spare time, and it's 3 monitors right up in front of me, and I just need to look into the webcam, which really is hard because it's. And on the left side is the recording, and on the right side it's a live stream how I'm looking, and I don't like my face, and I don't like my voice, so. Yeah, it's really funny, but Yeah, it's sort of uncomfortable at some point.
The very fun part, when I look into the cam, I'm looking with 6 eyes directly in his face. That's very, very interesting because 2 monitors showing our faces right now facing to us.
So
So
actually,
yeah.
actually we have high availability monitoring for the streaming, and yeah,
Yeah. So, yeah, I would say thank you very much for joining in. If you enjoyed it, if you have feedback, simply write it to us. We
us
will
know.
love to do it in the future again because I think it's a very interesting format actually to get some deep insights on Icinga. But for example, we could also do it for different kind of technologies. So there is lots of space in the open source world. Yeah. Plenty of events happening, plenty of changes. So I think we can cover some part of them. So yeah, like Thomas said, we will be back, hopefully. And yeah, if you do you have some last words? Not forever, but for now.
For now, oh, no, I really enjoyed it, and I also love talking about the things I do love, and Icinga is definitely one of them. Um, yeah, let's just do it on a regular, spontaneous basis, and you're doing a great job on keeping up with all the technical stuff, which is amazing. Yeah, and see you soon. See you at OSMC, see you at the SingaConf, see you somewhere else. Just keep talking to us.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining in. We see you in the next one and have a nice week. And yeah, bye. Have a nice
Bye.
evening.